The Trump campaign's launched around a dozen legal cases in some of the key swing states this election, not just Pennsylvania, Georgia, Nevada, Michigan, and they are quite different legal cases in each case. They're looking at things like ballots filled out with felt-tip pens that they say were being excluded in some locations, the fact that they say observers weren't allowed within the distance they wanted in other locations, and that particular claim's already been thrown out in Michigan. But one of the really interesting ones is the one that's going to happen here in Pennsylvania about votes that were received after Election Day but postmarked by Election Day. Now, this is a really interesting one because it's going to turn on a point of law, not evidence, and this has already been held over from before Election Day. That the Supreme Court here ruled that they wouldn't decide on this, but they were waiting until afterwards. We are looking at such tight margins here that it could matter, it could potentially not matter, even if those votes weren't counted, because the mail-in ballots were overwhelmingly going in Joe Biden's favour, and what we've seen is about 2.5 million sent in Pennsylvania, well exceeding what was previously done in 2016. But the Trump campaign is pushing ahead. If they could get the victory here, it could get that margin a bit closer, and potentially a win in another state could see them eke back over that line. Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, was saying that they're focusing in on Pennsylvania in particular.
I think we have enough to change Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania election was a disaster. I mean, I only gave you the highlights. I mean, we have people that observe people being pushed out of the polling place. It is not a coincidence that it happened in 8 different Democrat states, which means there had to be an order from somewhere.
Now, Tom, the saying goes, justice needs to seem to be done to be done. In this case, democracy needs to be seen to be done to be done. And definitely the mood on the ground here is that plenty of people, the Trump supporters, just simply are not accepting the fact that Joe Biden's had this election called for him. They're saying that they're waiting for these legal processes to go through. On the other side, the Joe Biden supporters are still celebrating. They're very happy about this result. They say there's no way that Donald Trump can come back, and they're not really interested in how these legal actions are going to play out. And then there's also been a big portion of people here in Pennsylvania who really aren't that engaged in it at all. They're so burnt out, they say they've had the TV off all week because they can't deal with it. But those Trump supporters certainly aren't backing down.
I think it's terrible. I think there's lots of fraud going on, and I think President Trump's going to prevail.
Yeah?
Yes.
What kind of fraud have you seen?
With counting the votes, bringing ballots in after the fact, people filling them in, just sitting there filling them in, and it's the same person doing multiple ballots. There's lots of cheating, lots of fraud. So I think they need to redo it fair. If Biden wins without cheating, so be it.
I'm reading a lot about, how people are saying that the results are not accurate. So I hope he fights it.
Yeah?
Yep.
What have you been reading? What have you seen about it not being accurate?
Well, the way the polls were, they're counting the wrong ones. People, like they said, they found a box of stuff that had all the same handwriting in it.
I don't feel there was any fraud. I think everything's on the up and up. Yeah, I think it's fair.
How did you feel when you woke up this morning?
I felt good. I felt hopeful.
Now, as you can imagine, the Biden supporters we spoke to here weren't really accepting any premise of voter fraud, saying that they haven't seen any evidence of it either. But one of the things that they were echoing, the same as the Donald Trump supporters, is they weren't seeing any kind of peaceful transition of power ahead.
I think it's a scary thought, but it's going to come down to him having no choice. But I think there will be a struggle. That's just my feeling.
It's a pretty extraordinary thing to say, really.
Mm-hmm. Right. So we'll see. Hopefully it's peaceful. For our country's sake, for the example that's being set for all our kids. Yeah.
So while we did see all the big scenes of celebrations in the big cities last night, there is still a bit of confusion and a bit of anxiety out in the rest of the country. And so this is certainly going to be a place to watch with how this all pans out, especially in the weeks ahead.